1, we said the student will understand why conflict can be needed to bring change.
Okay, why conflict can be needed. Why conflict can be needed to bring change.
Because during this, we talked, that's why it's connected to the jazz age.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because the United States was in
The big change after the war.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that.
Or we could reword that, but this is just an example of just how we were kind of thinking to make a generalization to connect it to our chart.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then we said enduring understanding 2 would be the student will understand cultural changes as a result of conflict.
Okay.
So it's not something that they're just going to apply here. They could apply it to our westward expansion unit, Spanish-American War. And then as we go further on into our next unit, they can apply it to World War II. They can apply it to...
Now, we're still gonna teach the specifics, but this is gonna be our driving force.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pulling it all together.
Pulling it all together.
Coming back to that.
So the enduring understanding is going to help us pull it all together so that they have a better understanding of culture, location and boundaries, the government, technology, how the economy changed throughout each war, and how it just, history keeps repeating itself. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay, one quick thing. I'm gonna need a little bit of tutoring on that one right there, cause I don't remember that. 3rd grade was a long time ago.
Yeah, I will probably need a little tutoring on the
Which one was
Revolution
it?
as well.
The
American Revolution.
I can pick it up from there. Civil
Uh-huh.
War, got it. World War I, got it. World War II, got it. Vietnam, getting there.
So, I'm gonna quiz y'all.
All right.
Well, what we did too, when we were stumped on one, we had to really think of it backwards. We started with the standard. What does the standard say? And then we took that, and then we looked at the learning goals. And we followed the path. So then the learning goals took us to the learning targets. Okay, here's what, and then from the learning targets, it's like we started with what they specifically needed to know and went backwards. And the ones that we got stumped on, I had to literally follow that train in my head to find the enduring understanding that would make sense, that tied it all together.
Okay.
So let's look at World War II. Come over here. So without all of the notes, so if we're looking at our essential questions, how does German aggression lead to imperialism? How does aggression of different nations set off a chain of major events? And then we look at our standards and our learning goals. I can explain how imperialism leads to aggression. I can explain how conflict leads to change by discussing the effects of the following events. So when we teach all of this, what generalization do we want kids to know? What do we want? How do we want them to connect it? What do we want students to understand?
It seems like it's the same thing, how conflict leads to.
And as we were writing them, we noticed that there were more connections than we realized that could be made between these units.
So, and that's where
pretty
this
cool.
comes in, right? With
Uh-huh.
the people, the location, the
Mhm.
leadership, technology. Okay,
Yes.
I see that. Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of just we said the student will understand how aggression between societies leads to conflict.
Okay.
So that way it's not specific just to World War One. We
But
can
you
also,
took out this part, the effects of blah, blah, blah. Yeah, by just saying that much, we can use it
Mhm.
all year long.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
to connect it, we can connect it to previous units, and we can
We can connect that
it
can
to
add on
stuff
to
that
it
has happened
as we
right
introduce
now.
it.
Yes,
Sure.
to right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does.
But I had to literally follow this. I'm go here, and then here, and then here to get that.
So let's talk about the next one.
Okay, well, wait, okay, so why? I know, don't be, stop. Tell me why what I need to know why we're going to do this.
Instead of just having an enduring understanding on paper, your kids are actually going to be able to connect everything.
And come
That's
back
what I'm
to that
saying, what am
thing.
I expecting out of them? When we get to the Vietnam War, I'm expecting them to go, hey, wait a minute, didn't we talk about,
How do you get them to do that?
Yes, that's what
That's
we
what I'm saying, I
want
want
them to
to
do.
know.
What is the
to
vehicle
expect.
out of the scope and sequence to get there, though?
Your learning goals. And when you're doing these learning goals, and then you go back and you make connections to this enduring understanding, have those conversations
The
about
link is
previous
actually your
words.
EQs,
Yes.
Yeah.
that
Your-
questioning.
Your questioning.
This is key right here.
So you use the EQs as a tool to link that content and those learning goals.
And if they're linking stuff together, then it's.
Conceptual understanding.
Yeah.
So then it applies to
They're
other.
already pretty good at linking things together.
Oh, yeah.
This group is.
This
Yeah.
group is definitely.
But to me, this chart right here is going to be key for them to see it and understand the different time periods and how culture changes and how.
Well, and it puts it all in one place, so
Yes.
instead of them seeing it in isolation, okay, now we're talking about this event, okay, now we're talking about this event, they're seeing it all and how it literally connects in one visual.
How history can repeat itself.
Mhm.
But how there's patterns, how, there's always, I'd say always, there's most of the time conflict, and after conflict, that leads to some sort of change.
Cause we had several
We need
conversations.
to do this with civil rights as well.
Uh-huh. As we were working, and we were like, we're just repeating ourselves. We don't
Mm-hmm.
wanna just repeat ourselves, we want this to connect everything.
Well, that's like she's saying patterns, and so
Mhm.
I'm thinking, when you see the pattern of something,
That's gonna help them apply new information,
Yeah.
so if this happened as a result of this war, then what changes can I look for after this war that I'm
Right.
just now learning about?
Yeah.
They can take it and
so
apply
it's
it
more
because they see
independent
it.
thinking, them thinking through and them learning on their own.
Right.
Okay.
Cause we eventually want them to think, oh, we're starting a new war,
I wonder if it's gonna have, yeah.
new technology.
What came
How
out,
would
what
that
was the
affect-
result of
Economy's
this
gonna
war,
say.
what happened?
Yes.
So
How
they're
are we
thinking, not
going-
just sitting there going,
Memorizing facts and
Yeah.
timelines and things like that.
How are we going to know if they have connected? What proof are we gonna have at the end of this that our kids have made those connections?
I say it's a substantive conversation.
And can they have their own chart?
Yeah,
To
that's
fill
what I was
out their own
thinking.
chart?
You know, and maybe at the end, have them pick, one thing, people, location, leadership, technology. How has it changed over time? Why?
This leads our cornerstone task.
Okay.
Do we want to change our cornerstone task to
Absolutely. If this is
incorporate?
where we're headed, then yeah.
If this is what we're gonna do, yeah, I like this, yeah.
So that way at the end, we're gonna scaffold them all year long to get there, but at the end, there's our proof. They've
Okay.
made those connections. So
Okay.
that's something we can think about too.
And I like that being a working, living document that they
Mhm.
keep
Yes.
all year, because blank, they can see what they're gonna be learning ahead of time, and then as they fill it in, they can go on and be making those connections as they go. And then when they're done, they can look back and see how it really does all connect.
It's all on paper in front of them.
Yes.
So going forward, this is how we want to plan.
Okay.
I think that's what we've been looking for the whole time.
It
It's kinda
has.
like, there it is, yeah.
It has been exactly what we've been looking for.